Today, I'm going to show you how to change the transmission fluid on your late model Shovelhead. I'm Grease, you're watching Grease's Garage, and I'm going to help you skip the struggle. So diving into this topic, guys, when I say a late model Shovelhead, I'm talking 79 to 84. And the reason for that distinction is because this is what's known as the rotary top transmission. So not the ratchet top. Today, we're talking rotary top transmission. Sometimes it's referred to as a Cowpie transmission or a late model Shovelhead transmission. It's the one that's in my bike, even though my bike's an Evo, but if you've got a shovel, this process is going to be exactly the same for you as it is for me because we're dealing with the exact same transmission. If you've never done this before, do not worry. This is a super simple process that can be summed up in 4 simple steps: ride, drain, fill, and weep. If you don't understand the 4th one, don't worry. By the end of the video, you will understand. There are really just 3 things we're concerned with. The first is the drain plug. You can see on the screen right here, the drain plug is located on the back side of the transmission facing your rear wheel. The bolt on this drain plug is a 5/8. And with my particular brake setup, you can see it's a little bit next to that drain plug. So I like to use a 5/8 deep socket for this job. You might not have any interferences there, in which case you could just use a regular socket or whatever you want to use to get onto that drain plug. Next up, we've got the fill plug, which you can see right here. This is a very large bolt. I've actually never put a socket on this bolt, but because I love you guys so much, I measured it for you. It is 1 1/8. But as you can see in this shot here, I've got a small adjustable that takes this thing off, and that is all I ever use on this plug. Last but not least, alluding to that 4th step I mentioned earlier, here you can see the weep hole. This is the 3rd spot we're focusing on today. This is a 3/16 Allen. This weep hole will come into play on the final part of the step, and it's going to let you know when you filled your transmission to capacity. So let's start things off with step 1, which is ride. Go ride your motorcycle. The reason we do this is 1, it's a lot of fun. That's why we get into motorcycles in the first place. And 2, you want to heat up the oil that's inside your transmission. It's just going to help it to drain out a little easier. So go take your bike on a 10-minute spin and then come back and continue with the process. First thing we're going to do as we get started with the draining process is remove the fill plug. Now this might seem unusual because you think, hey, why would I take the fill plug out? I need to take the drain plug out, right? Yes, but the reason we remove the fill plug first is so that air can travel down and push out all of that extra oil. It's just like when you do a regular oil change, you always pull the dipstick or fill cap on the top of your oil tank before you pull the drain plug. So go ahead and pull your fill cap now. The next step in the process is to drain that oil. So you're going to follow along just like you see me doing on screen here. Put that 5/8 socket onto your drain plug and spin it out with a pan, of course, underneath the bike to catch all of that extra oil. So it's nice to catch it in a fresh pan so you can swish a magnet around in there just to make sure that there's no massive metal shavings or broken off gears inside your oil. Now that you've got all of the oil drained out of your transmission, it's time to go ahead and reinstall your drain plug. Be very careful with this one. My drain plug is actually very delicate. It never feels like it's quite tight enough, and it makes me very nervous. Every time I take this drain plug out, I wonder if it'll be the last time that it seats in there properly. If it ever does get to the point where you can't get the drain plug to stay back in, you will have to drill that out and re-tap the case. It's not a terrible process. If you're a member of the Grease's Garage Facebook group, there's actually a builder in there right now who is describing the process of doing this to his transmission. So make sure you join. That Facebook group is called Grease's Garage. So just go ahead, answer the questions, click submit. I will approve you, and you can get in there and have these discussions on these more technical topics with other builders that are working on the same bikes as you. With the oil removed and the drain plug reinserted, we can now move on to the process of filling the transmission. So what we're going to do now is remove this weep hole plug. This plug, like I said, is a 3/16 Allen plug. You're just going to want to remove this plug and set it off to the side for now, but do not lose it because I can't imagine where you would track down another at a local parts store. So make sure you hold on to this plug. It's very small. Before I get started with the filling, let me just make one statement here. This is not going to become an oil use debate. People use every different type of oil under the sun in their transmission. Before I had this Shovelhead transmission in my bike, I had a regular 5-speed from the Evo, and I always used the Redline transmission fluid from Harley Davidson. It works phenomenal. I'm not affiliated with Harley. I get nothing from your purchase if you buy this particular oil, but my transmission is so buttery smooth. I never have trouble finding neutral. I never pop out of gear, and I ride a jockey shift foot clutch with no front brake, so it's pretty important that I be able to get into and out of the gears that I need to be in. So I've had good luck with it. That does not mean that I wouldn't have good luck with running other types. I've just never tried them, and I can't think of any reason why I should. As you can see right here, I am just pouring the transmission fluid into that transmission fill plug. One note on this, you have to pour it and then give the bike a minute for that transmission fluid to slide down into all the nooks and crannies of the transmission. If you just heavy-handedly pour it in there, it's going to overflow and dump out the top. So you're just going to periodically, like you see me doing here, add the transmission fluid, wait a couple seconds. Add some more fluid, wait a couple seconds. This is where the weep hole is going to come into play. Once you have filled the transmission with enough fluid that you can start to see just the tiniest bit of transmission fluid dripping out of this weep hole, that's how you know you're at the proper capacity. You can see it on the screen here. That transmission fluid is just starting to leak out of this. Just go ahead and give it a wipe with a cloth and then put that weep hole plug back into the weep hole. Your transmission now has enough fluid in it, and you are ready to move on to the next step. All that's left in that step is for you to put your fill plug back into the top of the transmission. Seal that section up, and you are done. Give that whole transmission a quick wipe down so you know that everything is clean, because if you don't get all that residual oil off, it can drip off once the motor heats up, and you might think you have a leak when you actually don't. Now, that's the end of the technical process for how you change the transmission fluid. But I have one additional tip to give to you that you might not hear on other channels, because here on Grease's Garage, I am just a regular guy. I'm not a professional mechanic. I don't have all the answers, and I'm not an expert. What I do have is a leaky transmission, a real leaky transmission, not just from failing to clean off the residual from the oil change. Every time I park my bike, I come back to at least a couple of drips underneath the transmission. It is very common for these Shovelhead transmissions to leak like this. I've heard it from many, many different people. A more competent mechanic, perhaps, would go and trace down the source of that leak and fix it, but I'll be honest with you, I've just never had the time nor the drive to chase down every little leak coming out of this transmission. I know it's old technology, and it probably will leak like this forever, so let me tell you what I do throughout the season. Every 2 weeks, or every 1 week if I've been riding a lot in a particular week, I will remove this weep hole plug from the transmission case. If I notice that no fluid is weeping out, I will add just a little bit more fluid until that weep hole starts to weep again, and then I plug it back in just like we did a second ago, and I continue riding the bike. And I just repeat this process throughout the year. This might seem insane to some people, especially if you have a newer bike and you've never been into choppers before. If you're deep into the chopper game, you might also be doing this yourself. It's more common than you think, but I wanted to include this as part of the video because I don't want you to do this process and feel like, oh, maybe you've done something wrong, or why can't you fix those leaks? Everybody else's bike seems to run perfectly. No. The bike has been running perfectly for me, but the transmission has indeed been leaking, and don't feel like you absolutely have to chase this down or your bike is just going to explode or grenade on the highway or something like that. It's very common. That's the process I use to maintain it throughout the season, and at the end of the season, I do this annual oil change to get full fresh oil back into the transmission. If you enjoyed this video and you want to learn more about how to change your engine oil, click on this video right here. I have a full breakdown of all the steps involved with changing the engine oil on an Evo Softail. Thanks for watching Grease's Garage, and I will catch you guys next week.